It is 9 o'clock Eastern. Welcome to Nightcaps with Nate. Get your drink and let's get ready to go. Right now, we are going to bring on Jeremy Colby. Jeremy Colby is hailing originally from the state of Michigan and now lives in Indiana, where he is a business owner. He's going to provide the more liberal perspective tonight. So, let me bring him on and we will get going. Welcome, Jeremy. I see you got your drink. It doesn't look like you're going to be drinking an alcoholic beverage, but you can nightcap the way you want. We're a show for non-alcoholics as well. Like I said earlier, I'm drinking my Bacardi and Diet Coke. Hey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you started in Michigan. You're now in Indiana. How did that happen?
Well, actually, I am just barely in Michigan. I have said for a long time, I'm about 3 miles from the Indiana border. Said if I'm moving any further south, there's not going to be winter where I'm moving. So,
That's right.
yeah. So I'm staying in Michigan. I love Michigan, but yeah, I grew up in northern Michigan, in Grayling, and then went to school in Grand Rapids at Grand Valley, and then have moved down here, and that's where I am.
So where in Michigan do you live?
I live in Niles.
Okay.
Which
yeah.
is
I used to
basically. Oh, really?
Yep, I used to live right in
That's,
Niles on
okay.
East Fifth Street. Going out of town,
Oh, wow.
wanted to watch the river, the creek there, or river, whatever you want to call it. I used to have a house right there on the river. I was in charge of the recruiting station in Niles, Michigan. It's since been closed down. I don't know if they've reopened it, but yeah, I was there from roughly 2004, 5 to 2006. So that was
Okay.
I was a Niles resident.
That
Right
was
on the
that was
road
about
from
the time I
Delaware.
moved here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
It's a small
definitely.
little
Yep.
town.
Yep.
And it's just north of South Bend, Indiana. In fact, if you want to go to the mall, you have to go to Mishawaka, which is really kind of a suburb. If South Bend was big enough to have a suburb, you go to the mall there. Is that mall still there?
Yeah, actually, I have a store in that mall.
Oh, do you?
We're currently closed due to coronavirus, but we
Wow.
have a indoor play center in there. So
And I used to
yeah,
go
we're
to
definitely in
Granger
there.
Community Church, which is right across from Target there. A really big church. I really enjoyed it. It was a great church. So I brought on Jeremy, and I invite anybody else who is progressive if they would like to co-host. I love to be, I know not to steal it from Fox News, fair and balanced, but I think that we should be in our commentary.
Absolutely.
Should not be so one-sided. So today we're going to discuss a few things, starting off with the coronavirus update. I like to do an update since we are in times that we have never seen before. Jeremy, you will not be able to see my screen, so I will read to you what's on the screen and then we'll discuss it from there. So, for the viewers at home, the coronavirus death rate they are saying is actually going to be lower than previously reported. This is from CNN. Now, I do not usually quote CNN. I think CNN was a great news source up until about 2016. They've kind of gone a little to the left, in my opinion. But study says it's still deadlier than seasonal flu. We thought it was going to be, at first it was a 2.4% death rate, and then it seems to have gone down to a 1% death rate, and now they are saying it's about two-thirds of a percent death rate, which is good. That's good news. Doesn't sound
Absolutely.
like a big drop, but when you're talking about thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, millions of people getting it, a third of a percent could mean the saving of many lives. So, I know that a lot of people have said that a lot of people on my side of the aisle, I think both sides of the aisle tends to have conspiracy theorists. You have on the left, you have the truthers of 9/11 or whatever. On the right, we have a lot of our own. Obama was the Antichrist. I never subscribed to that stuff. I've always been kind of a little bit more mainstream in my thoughts. I had my twin brother on last night. He thinks that this is a big hoax. I just saw another right-wing person who sent me a video, and supposedly GlaxoSmithKline had patented a vaccine for this virus, and they're already got it in production, and this is some big ploy so that we can all have to buy this thing. I don't know who they would have in their pockets, but is it a conspiracy theory?
No, I don't think so. I think that my view on conspiracy theories is that if you get more than two people, you've got to trust that all of those people are gonna hold their water, basically. That they're not
Right.
going to And so, and what I know about the world and what you've probably seen in the world is if you get more than a couple people involved in something, somebody's going to run their mouth. Somebody's going to let the cat out of the bag. Somebody's going to blow the whistle. And so this is my problem with all left wing, right wing, all of the conspiracy theories, is it, a lot of them would take literally thousands of people to be able to pull it off.
Exactly.
And so
people. We can't even get 3 people to do an armed robbery without snitching on each other, let alone thousands.
Absolutely. And so, so I don't see any way that this could have been a conspiracy. I know some people have said like it's a biological weapon that somebody unleashed and all that type of thing. I think the tendency is that people want, when something significant is happening, they want to assign order and meaning to it. And so when I see something that I can't control, like coronavirus that shut down the entire economy, that's going to have hopefully not as high of a death rate, but a relatively high death rate and all that type of stuff. And I'm worried about grandma, and I'm worried about my mom, and I'm worried about all of these people. What I want to do is believe that there was some force out there acting to make this bad thing happen. And then that gives me something I can attack. And that makes us feel better. That releases our anxiety a little bit. But the problem is life, unfortunately, I believe, is not usually that simple. It's usually much more complex than that. And sometimes stuff happens for a whole bunch of complex reasons. And that conspiratorial thinking doesn't usually end up panning out.
Look at that. I chose this on purpose, the first one, because we would agree on this. I like it. All right. All right. So the next one will probably be a little more contentious here. Let me get on over to this again. You won't be able to see it, but top stories, COVID-19 updates, an example of media bias. I threw it in there. All I did is I took, for Jeremy, I took 6 of the top stories about the FDA granting emergency authorization to chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19. I think a good news story because right now we don't have anything else and we got to quit studying it.
Sure.
But there is one, and I'll let you guess which news outlet it was. It's not CNN. But this, while all the other headlines were kind of positive, this one says, FDA authorizes widespread use of unproven drugs to treat coronavirus. What outlet do you think that was?
I'm going to say that sounds, well, it's either the Huffington Post or MSNBC, one or the other.
You would think so, but no, it is almost as bad, but not quite as bad as those, in my opinion. I know you probably love those. It is actually the Washington Post. The Washington Post.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I do think that there's 2 sides to this issue, okay? We haven't put, for use with this drug, we haven't put it through the paces that we would normally put through. And I get we don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
Huh?
I said why. You just answered it. We don't have time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but there is a perspective that says, so the downside of doing this, so there's always upsides and downsides to everything. So the downside of pushing this drug as a potential treatment without having the proper research behind it is that we're potentially creating a shortage of the drug, which everybody is already saying is likely to happen. Now, how long does it take to catch up or whatever? But the problem is that this is already an approved treatment for rheumatoid arthritis. It's already an approved treatment for lupus. All right. And so the downside, like if I was going to be the naysayer here, I would say, I know that these drugs are approved for use with these conditions, and we don't have enough data to say for sure that these other, that it's going to work well. All right. It's looking good, but we don't have enough data. So it's dangerous, and I shouldn't say dangerous, but there is a downside to just rolling it out there, because we might find out if we use it hundreds of thousands of times, we might find out that it's less effective than we were hoping. Well, right. Yeah. And then
I agree with that. It could be, but in the absence of nothing, there's something. Like I was talking to a Michigan school teacher because Governor Whitmer shut down the whole schools. And I said, hey, why aren't they at least, doing something online or something? And this teacher's like, well, not all kids have it. And I said, well, if West Virginia can at least send out packets and then have the teachers calling once a day or once every other day and going over the packets, and then we scan and we email it. And then for those that don't have scanners, even poor people tend to have iPhones. They take pictures, they send it in. He's like, well, that just, relegates me down to good teaching is not packets. And I'm saying, yeah, the alternative is nothing. Same here. The alternative is nothing. And yes, there are some asshole doctors who started hoarding this stuff, so prescribing it to their own family. To me, they should be sent up to an ethics board anyways, because you're only supposed to prescribe medicine for actual medical reasons. That's a violation of the FDA and possibly the DEA if it was a controlled substance. But this is a studied drug. We already know who can't take this drug. People with heart.
Sure.
And the anecdotal evidence is that if we can keep, let's just say even just 50% of the patients off of a ventilator, that's 50% more ventilators we have. And we know with Governor Cuomo, I'm giving him props. He's doing a good job up there, even though he's a Democrat, and I don't really care for his brother on CNN, but we'll go over that later. Good guy, and we'll get into that in my final thoughts. But we are in the absence of nothing. So I'm wondering also, and give me your take on this, because you're a pretty smart guy. I'm wondering if all of a sudden, does this mean that some of the other drugs that they are trying aren't so promising, and so now they're like, holy cow, get it out there?
I would expect so. I mean, if they have indications that one treatment is working and other treatments aren't working as well, or they're not having the same results, obviously they're going to push the treatments that are working. And from what I've seen, and the good news is that within 6 months, we're going to know all kinds of stuff about this virus and what works to treat it, what doesn't work to treat it, because the nature of the crisis is forcing everybody to focus on this problem at once. And so yeah, I would say definitely, if we're seeing all of this, press is probably not the best indicator, but if we're seeing this push, I mean, Spectrum Health in Grand Rapids is using it. Some of the Detroit hospitals are using it. The issue is the shortages that are already, they're not there yet, but they're starting to creep up. But yeah, I think obviously if people are pushing this, and they're pushing it all over the world, then obviously somebody's getting, decent results. And some of the stuff I've been reading about it have been that it is helping. And so, and are we going to find out other things as we go on, other treatments, other drugs that work?
Of course.
Yeah, that's highly likely too, right?
I mean, with time, sure. If you think about Tamiflu, and then there was another anti-flu, with time, anything's going to happen. They're racing. And for me, I'm a free market capitalist. That's kudos to the free market capitalism that these drug companies are racing for a cure. Now, I am a skeptic too. I think a lot of this stuff, I think there were two reasons why Governor Whitmer, Governor Cuomo originally, and some of these Democrat governors were blocking the use of hydroxychloroquine, and I think it's unfortunate. One was because Trump touted it, and they hate Trump. Okay, and I understand Trump is a polarizing figure to the left, even though the left loved him before he started running. Secondly,
for the record, I never liked the guy.
Huh?
I said, for the record, I never liked the guy, but I never liked Bill Clinton either. So,
I like Bill. The old Bill, not today's Bill. But the other thing is the FDA paying these people off. Not the FDA, the big pharma. Because here's the deal. Hydroxychloroquine is cheap. It's generic. We've known about it. It's been on the market for 40 years. Probably get it for 5 cents a pill. It might go up now, but $1 a pill. But a new and novel treatment is going to cost you hundreds of dollars.
Oh, sure. Well, what I would say, though, is the way our market system works, there's a high likelihood that somebody is going to be able to buy the patent. And, some hedge fund out there is probably already working on that. And this would be my left-leaning skepticism, is that they're in business to make as much money as they possibly can. And they've got potentially a treatment that could cost somebody their lives if they don't have it. And that creates a scenario where they can charge almost as much as they want for it. Because, and we see that, and this is one of the reasons that I support some version of universal healthcare and government healthcare and those types of things, because the healthcare system is, it's primed for market failure. Because it's one of the few things that we have in the world where I can say to you, give me $400,000 or you're going to die. and this is the only thing that can help you, right? And if I walked into your house and held a gun to your head and said, give me $400,000, we wouldn't have a problem with that. And I understand that there's definitely something different ethically.
No, we would have a problem with that. You said we would
right. No, yeah, we would have a problem with that. Right. I understand that there's a difference ethically, but the functionality of how that works, the person who's fighting for their life has no ability to negotiate. Markets rely on the ability to negotiate. And so that's actually one of the main reasons that I think we need, in a smart way, doesn't always have to be, there's a million different ways to approach it. But I look at a lot of the healthcare systems around the world, and we have to find a way to deal with that market failure.
Well, what we need to do is take on some of these socialist countries who have put in artificial price caps on medication. Now, this is just for pharmaceuticals. You're right. Healthcare is too damn expensive in this country, and part of it is because of our insurance industry and the mandates the government has placed on it, what has to be covered for free. And oh, by the way, since everybody has insurance, now they can put hidden prices on there for those that don't have insurance. Here's where I think most Americans are going to disagree with you on a public option. First of all, I came out many times. This is one of the areas where I have actually progressed, I guess, if you want to call it progress, is I think at the state level, because we're a federalist country, I think we should have a public option. However, I do not think, and I think this is where Democrats like to step on their own toes, I do not think that at the debate, when they ask, hey, would universal health care also apply to those who are undocumented, and everybody raised their hands, I think you just lost 60% of America. You have just lost 60% of America because America does not reward illegal behavior. And coming in this country illegally, not only are they getting, free care for their kids, not care, K through 12 education, but all of a sudden now we're going to actually give them a free health care too. I think most Americans are going to go on that. But that's another conversation. I'll let you have 10 seconds for the last word because I got to move on.
Okay, yeah. Well, with that, what I would say is if they don't have health care, they still go to the emergency room and you've got an unreimbursed care problem. Yeah, so
you do.
So there's a functional issue that you have to solve there.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. And like I said, we'll do a segment on that later. Next thing, define trickle-down economics in 10 seconds or less.
The idea that if I put money in the hands of the people who know what's best to do with it, eventually they will use it to grow their business and create jobs and make all of us richer in the process.
Yeah, it's the idea that rising tides lift all boats. Well, the last person I ever thought would believe in it is Nancy Pelosi, but she now wants to retroactively lift the SALT limits on state and local tax deductions. And Business Insider says that would actually be almost useless for most people who need the help. In other words, she's trying to give a big giveaway to the rich, because guess who's affected by the SALT caps? The rich. And really what it is, and I'll give you a chance to respond in a second here, is that she is trying to, New York, California, Illinois, they have a horrible problem with losing rich residents right now. And by the way, when you start taxing the rich a little too much, they start saying, whoa, it's getting too expensive. And I think that the SALT caps were the final nail in that coffin. A lot of people said, hey, I'm not going to sit here and pay all this money to a state government. It's time for everybody to pitch in. So they've all voted with their feet and they've left. So she's trying to pad the state coffers by saying, hey, no, we can remove the cap of $10,000. That way, basically, all taxpayers are paying for a progressive state's unfunded liabilities. What say you?
Okay, so I'm going to take a little different approach with it, okay? And I'm not saying I completely disagree with you, but let's look at it from a different perspective, okay? I have a list here on Wallet Hub of the rankings of states based on the amount of federal assistance that they get, okay? And so the lowest federal assistance often are the blue states. They're at the lower end of the spectrum, that are paying a high amount in state and local taxes. And the highest receivers, so like for instance, New Mexico's number one, let's just call them purple. After that, it goes Mississippi, West Virginia, Montana, Kentucky, Alaska, Arizona, Indiana, Alabama, South Carolina. There's no blue in there, okay? And so I think the issue is, or one way you could look at this is that the high state and local taxes that they're paying in somewhere like Connecticut, let's say, are providing for social services that allow for fewer people to actually need help from the federal government. And so there is a trade-off there. And you could say it's a little bit unfair for those states that are charging more in taxes and aren't relying on the federal government as much for assistance, to have to pay to not get that write-off. And then the states that have the lower state and local taxes are actually taking more from the federal government. And usually, in most cases, the blue states, the Connecticut's, the Californias, the places like that are paying the most federal revenue in.
So you're saying that the states that are most hurt by salt actually contribute more to the federal government than the red states, who actually take more than what they contribute to the federal government. And I
Absolutely.
can see where you're coming with that. However, the biggest GDP growth and jobs growth are in red states. There's a reason why so many people leave blue states and end up in red states, and we had this discussion last night, is because the tax climate's better for businesses. There's more jobs because there's more businesses in those states. In fact, there was one article, I think it was in the Huffington Post, I referenced maybe last night, that said that red states should be wary because the blue state people have moved in so much that they're actually going to change a lot of these states to purple or blue. And you see that. You mentioned New Mexico. I would say Arizona, Florida. In fact, there are T-shirts and signs out there that say "Don't California my Texas" and stuff. So 20 seconds, last word. Go ahead.
Well, what I would say with that, as far as "Don't California my Texas," California has the 6th largest economy on the globe. And so the problems that they have are related to their success. Okay. I understand that the growth is happening elsewhere. I understand that there are some people who are getting priced out of it, but the reality is, if California was a miserable failure, there wouldn't be high housing there. Nobody would want to live there. They wouldn't be having the problems that they're having, but they've been able to grow their economy so much that it is creating there's always unintended consequences. And it is definitely creating some of those unintended consequences. And I think the scales are balancing out a little bit.
Well, the high housing is because of high regulation. I lived in California for a few years. In fact, right after Defiance, Ohio. And Defiance was right after Niles. I was in the Army, so I moved everywhere. But in California, their problem is that they have so regulated housing that they can't keep up with the population, the immigrant population that's coming in. It's created an artificial market. So it is so expensive. One builder told me that before they put their first nail, by the time they buy the land and pay all the taxes and the fees and the environmental regulation, that they've already spent $100,000. So before the wood, before anything else, before the market increase, they've already that house was already $100,000. And we know in parts of Michigan, you can buy a whole house for $100,000. 10 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I think part of that, though, is driven by the fact that all of the people who are doing very well in California are trying to protect their property values, which right. I actually have a problem with. Okay.
Yeah, as a leftist, you should.
Right. So, but I think a lot of those regulations and stuff, that's what they're designed to do. And it does drive up the price. It also drives up the value of their house, which creates wealth for them.
Yeah.
And so
wealth for the cities too. Property taxes.
Oh yeah. And so I actually have, this is a whole nother discussion, but I think we should get back, at least to some extent, to looking at housing as housing and investing as investing. If people want to pop a tiny house next to my house because that's what they can afford and it works for them, let them do it. I understand I might take a little bit of a hit, but I'd rather have people have.
You're right. Yeah, we don't have time for that today, but no, I love zoning laws, but that's that.
I'm sure you do.
All right, next one. Trump says the time is right to pass a big and bold $2 trillion infrastructure plan. He says that he wants a $2 trillion infrastructure plan to take advantage of the low interest rates because the economy is so bad worldwide. We're basically borrowing free money. And with interest rates, not free interest, no interest money. And with interest rates for the United States being zero, this is the time to do our long-awaited infrastructure bill. It seems like he actually has got a little bit of support from the Democrats on this one because they've always been for big infrastructure, big spending. I have a problem. Okay, so I see pros and cons, And the pros and cons are this. The pros, okay, it is 0% interest money, which means over time, because money always devalues, we're actually getting kind of free money. We
Right.
could bring in a lot of jobs. Our infrastructure is horrible compared to other countries. We've let
Absolutely.
it go. Part of that was because we've developed much cleaner cars that use a lot less fuel, and our road funds and infrastructure funds are largely based on a gas tax that has not been increased in forever.
You
And
don't live in a place where there's a lot of pickup trucks?
hey, and tons of jobs, and and we already know that good infrastructure breeds more business because it's cleaner looking, it looks nice,
Right.
it's
Absolutely.
in fact, around this DC metro area that I live in, as soon as they pop a metro station somewhere, all of a sudden high-rise apartment buildings that are way overpriced grow up because people love the ease of public transit. Now here's where I have a problem with it. I'm a federalist. While I support Trump and most of his policies, I think that we need to get back to where states, and this brings me back to the coronavirus thing too. If you're blaming the president, you also need to blame your governor, because every state, we were originally founded like the EU, where we had little countries called states that were loosely connected by a federal government. And in the case of Europe, that's called the EU. And there's certain things that Germany has to do for Germany and England has to do for England, and not everything is the EU's problem. Same here.
Sure.
There's certain things that our Constitution left to the states, which is everything not mentioned in the Constitution. So why is the federal government getting into infrastructure? That's where I'm kind of on the fence. Yes, it'd be great for jobs. Yes, it's interstate commerce they can tie it to. What say you?
So I think, again, I think the interstate commerce is a huge part of this, right? So if I've driven across that bridge in Minnesota that collapsed a few years ago. We do a festival out there every year, and I've driven across that thing. Huh?
I live at Alice in Minnesota too. Go ahead.
Oh, geez. I love Minnesota. It's a little cold, but
it's great.
But I've driven across that bridge, and the reality is, I'm from Michigan, right? And I want to know, wherever I drive in this country, that the bridge isn't going to fall out from under me and drop me into the Mississippi River.
Again,
okay.
Though, just for time, is that a state issue or a federal issue?
I think the states, there's two issues with the states. One is that they don't often have the resources, and they don't have the political will. And so why don't they have the resources? Because it's unpopular to tell people that they have to pay a lot more in taxes to get something done.
So it's a lot easier for federal government to collect those taxes, which was not how we were designed. It was actually, up until wartime, we didn't even have a federal income tax. And so states used to pay into the federal government just to keep it going, kind of like the countries pay into the UN. You know, every country chips in a little bit, and the UN keeps going. And so what we have done is we've replaced states who have their own army, their own air force called the National Guard. They have their own constitution, their own courts, their own everything. In fact, anything appealed from the state Supreme Court automatically has to go to the actual Supreme Court of the United States, because that was the beauty of the states. And we have usurped that role of the states to where basically big government has taken over. And that's fine. If we want to do that, we just need to change the Constitution, which the founders made hard on purpose. All right, we are going to move on to our next. Whoops, I hit the wrong thing. And I'm going to just kind of skip through this one. But Trump White House considering hazard pay for healthcare workers. I think we can both agree with that, especially federal healthcare workers where the federal government actually pays them. I think that Trump is making a play for women here because most healthcare workers, especially nurses, happen to be females. What do you think? 10 seconds.
Yeah, I think let's put it this way. Those people are putting their lives on the line. I'm not gonna say they shouldn't get some compensation for it.
Do you think it's a smart play?
I don't think Trump has to worry about that. I don't think Trump has to worry about that. I think that if he came out for Medicare for all tomorrow, I think it would get passed, and I think the vast majority of his supporters would be cheering and saying, "We told you Trump Care was going to be awesome." I'm not saying you're one of those, but
I gotta have you on again. All right, moving on. We got. I was gonna go over some FISA abuse. I think this is a big story. I might actually cover it a little bit more tomorrow. I think that anytime, whether it's Democrat or Republican, the FISA courts are so hidden that they have to have accountability. The watchdog for the IG for the Justice Department came out. They did a sample of 29 cases from across the country, FISA warrants, and found errors in all 29, and that's a big concerning issue. I think if you're and then my final thoughts for today, you can't see this, but CNN anchor Chris Cuomo tests positive for coronavirus, and also Joe Diffie, one of my favorite country stars, has died from coronavirus this week. It's a sad story. Yes, the death rates may be lower. Yes, the conspiracy theories out there, but I wish, regardless of politics, regardless of anything, I wish health on everybody, including Chris Cuomo, and prayers for the Joe Diffie family. Final words. Go ahead.
No, hey man, this has been fun. And honestly, I don't think we're way far off. I think we have some structural things that we disagree on, but I had a lot of fun today. And I also am thinking about a lot of the people out there who are suffering from coronavirus. We see new stories every day, and especially the healthcare workers who are going out there and just
God
giving
bless
their
the healthcare
everything.
Workers. God bless the people out there in Walmart, even the $10 or $15 employee who's having to do that, going to work. You know, the truck drivers. Like I said, my lawn guy was out today. I know in Michigan that's illegal, but here they're still allowing it because we're a little more remote and rural. Hey, for all those people out on the front lines, we're with you. We support you. We can get through this. We're going to get through this. Left or right, we are still the United States of America. Until tomorrow, thanks, Jeremy, for being on. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 9 p.m. Goodbye.
Thanks for having me.